What an experience! Guild Wars 2 has such a different style to it from other MMOs. From its gameplay being somewhere between both tab targeting and action combat, all the way to how the story is told. It's an interesting way to have an MMO work. There are so many people that I pass by in this game all the time, and it really goes to show just how the overall love for the game is. Now that I've done the base game's story, how was the first part of the post level 80 content in comparison?
It's over.
Oh, that's a lot of dying. This is part 3 of my video series showcasing my experience through the game itself. There are many different ways people have experienced this game. Being there from day one, coming in after Living World Season 1 was taken out, so they had a big hole in the narrative just there, and came back to experience it after being much further in the game. And you have my experience, coming in very late to the game, but being able to experience Living World Season 1 placed where it was at the beginning. While that may sound like a similar concept to people who have been there since the beginning, that's because it is. However, the main difference between both perspectives is that Season 1 at launch was the only post-game content added at that time. Now, everyone has access to much further content, including the 3 expansions. With all of that said, what was my overall experience with Season 1? Living World Season 1 is tough.
Help me, please.
When I was playing through the base game's story, there was a natural progression feeling. Starting the game is obviously easier than the end game, but there was a sort of flow to it, where as you grew, so too did your enemies in difficulty, but not to an absurd degree. It was to the point where I could solo the final dungeon. People have claimed it as being easy, and in hindsight, they're absolutely right. Once I got into the Season 1 story, the difficulty took a dramatic leap. Normal enemies had massive health pools and could easily down you if you weren't careful. Raising the difficulty in games is a perfectly natural thing. It's there to help keep people interested and wanting to progress further and further. There is one thing I would like to argue about though. The difficulty in Season 1 wasn't a progression-filled one, where they add in more mechanics, making you have to get better at the game. Oh no. It was difficult mostly from just raising the enemy's stats. In that sense, it's less about the player being bad at the game, and it being more of a jump in gear quality the player would need. While it's still possible to solo everything, if you hop straight into Season 1's story from the base game, there's a huge gap there that the player has to overcome. Granted, a lot of this content was also made to be done in groups, but when you don't have friends, that's a bit difficult. Going through this dungeon-like experience and saving people, we found the enemy's greatest weakness of all. They're weak to bully. So after getting to a boss fight and dying many times while very slowly whittling their health down, I decided to do what all solo players dread. I went out and asked for help. Heading back in with someone who was gracious enough to be fine with me recording, we took out the bosses and hopped out of the place once it was done. It was at this moment when I had the fabled social interaction that I've heard about. This is not the last we'll see of my new friend here. If this Molten Furnace experience has anything to go off of, the rest of Season 1 is the same difficulty. Alright, so one thing I need to bring up is one of my most hated parts of this experience. It's not the bosses, it's not the mechanics, it's not the traveling around. It's certain combinations of quote-unquote fodder enemies. You see, there are a few enemies that can be very annoying with how they fight you. One will put a debuff of sorts on you, making it so you can't attack for a certain time. And they use that all the time, by the way. But that's not the enemy in question here. I'm a melee fighter, a warrior if you will. So because of that, I'm always up close and personal with enemies. The bane of my existence is an enemy that can flatten you on the ground. They do that every now and then as an attack, easy enough to dodge overall. However, it gets bad when that same enemy can hold you in place so you can't dodge the attack.
Almost there.
How about if there's more than one? You end up getting chain locked in place, taking damage, and not being able to do anything about it. It's so infuriating. Don't worry, rant over. Let's flip the conversation here with something I absolutely loved about Season 1. The villain, Scarlett Briar. She comes out of nowhere and is a very competent villain with a fun, Joker-like personality. She's that type of villain that's always 3 steps ahead of you while you're trying to not only foil her schemes, but also figure out what her goals are and why she's doing it all. The more I found out about her character, the more I liked how she was written. She's the type of character that actually gets stuff done. Scarlett is the driving force and cause of the story here. Everything happens because of her, and she even has a great theme. Getting further and further into the story definitely brought some new and unique types of content to play. Stuff that I didn't do before. 2 instances in particular, Tower of Nightmares and the Battle for Lion's Arch, were big event-style modes that involved a ton of people to complete. The closest thing I could think to that would be Eureka or Bosja in Final Fantasy XIV. Even then, Tower of Nightmares was styled like a dungeon, whereas the Battle for Lion's Arch is a zone grab styled mode. They're both not only unique from other game modes, but also unique to each other. They were both something I didn't expect to see, and were quite fun when I wasn't dying by myself all the time. Can you solo the Tower of Nightmares Impossible Challenge?
Too strong. Now we can fight for real.
One thing I can say for certain is, at least for the Battle for Lion's Arch, don't leave until you're done. I switched map instances and it completely restarted my progress. One section that was definitely unexpected was when the story placed me into world versus world. There was a side objective available that you don't have to do, but I did give it the good old college try. It was tough and I did not succeed. So then I continued on with the story instead. There are some characters that you meet through this story. You have Rox, the Char Hunter, with a very clingy albino scorpion pet.
Oh, for rust's sake. Shoo. Get! I don't want another pet.
Bram, the Norn that goes bonk.
Refreshing.
And even this monstrosity. Oh wait, that's an enemy. It's a fun little troop you gather together during these unlikely circumstances. You have one of every race, kind of similar to Destiny's Edge. The only thing missing is the Sylvari that just left the world. Whoopsie. The whole experience was very different from how the base game went. It didn't have those side-by-side talking cutscenes with your character. Not sure if those will come back in the future or not, but time will tell on that. For all its ups and downs, I did really enjoy my time in Season 1. The story absolutely kept me going forward, wanting to see what was next, wanting to take on Scarlett, figuring out the goals, seeing the characters and how they interacted with each other. It was all really well done. My suggestion for anyone looking to experience Season 1 is to make sure you're either really beefed up or you're playing with friends. For characters right out the gate from the base story, it can be a lot. So take your time, enjoy the story, and have some laughs with friends. So, unlike with Season 1, I know absolutely nothing about Season 2. Scarlett and the Battle for Lion's Arch were definitely the highlights of this for me. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a date with Season 2.